How are you guys doing? Very excited to once again try to do a live session in which we're going to be talking and sharing a little bit of what we do here at the Hit Music Studio with hopefully some of our students, but also with people out there that might have an interest in learning how to play Latin piano. And one thing that for us is very cool is that we have a lot of people that are young. We have a lot of students that are younger than probably 12. And one of the things that we like to bring to them is, as much as we can, a little bit of variety. I think for us it's important to give them options. And today there's a lot of music. It's very easy to learn music, I guess, maybe from your favorite artists like Taylor Swift, Bruno Mars, Shawn Mendes. But I think Latin rhythms is something that it's a little bit specific, and it can be a great addition to whatever you're practicing as a piano player. So for us, it's really very cool to bring this content together. It was a lot more work than we thought, and one thing that we did on purpose, and this is actually very cool for you guys that are watching, we actually went ahead and did a page in which you guys are gonna get in when the live session is over, and if you register for this, I guess, mini course that we're doing, you're gonna get an email with a private page with tutorials. So you're gonna be able to see each one of this exercise with a specific tutorial, because they are I wouldn't say it's super hard, but they're very specific, and we want you guys to get the most value out of taking your time and being able to watch them many times. So we're gonna cover some of that. I think we're gonna go through some of the basics, some ideas about playing Latin piano, and at the same time we'll send you guys that email. If you are not registered already for this mini course, you can do that at intro-to-latinpiano.com. And that's going to be a page specifically designed so we can get your information, so we can actually send you not only the sheet music that we're using in the course, which is this, but at the same time where those tutorials are going to be. And let me mention that if you guys did print the sheet music, it's a good idea to have it so you can follow along. And I'm going to be playing in a second some of the patterns and talking about them. But we're trying to put as much as we can, something very clear. It is an introduction. Now, when we're talking about Latin rhythms in piano, we're talking about literally almost probably hundreds of years and a lot of different changes, a lot of different places that a lot of things happen. You have salsa from New York and you have salsa from Colombia, and those may be very different. So one of the things that we're trying to do with this specific mini course is give people an introduction to practice these things, just to get you started, a little bit of your feet wet in the process of learning these rhythms, which I think as a piano player, they can be really valuable to your practice, as we mentioned before. So let me start with this. And I have here something that I drew a little bit in advance. We're trying to go a little bit like low tech today. We have a way of plugging an iPad and drawing on it, but I wanted to make sure that this time, hopefully, we have a little bit better experience on the video. Last time we had a little bit of syncing issues. So here we want to mention this pattern, which let me get it there in the shot so you guys can see it clearly. This is going to be the clave. Now, one of the things that happens with the clave, and the clave is it's a specific concept that I think everyone should know. We have a pattern that is going to go two quarter notes with a dot, which, by the way, let me mention this. If this is your first time playing piano, this course may be a little bit somewhat on the advanced side. So we're intending this for our level 2, end of level 2 students, and level 3. Because some of the concepts that we're going to talk about, hopefully you have already taken lessons and covered some of the basics. So two quarter notes with a dot, followed by another quarter note. That would sound, and then we have a rest and two more quarter notes. So this rhythmic pattern, which is a building block of playing a lot of the Latin rhythms, would sound 1, and it repeats. Now, there are some variations to this, but one thing that I wanted to talk about as a piano player, important to know, you don't necessarily, as a piano player, and almost no instrument when you're playing the Latin rhythms, especially salsa, there are not necessarily Latin rhythms that you play the clave as a pattern on the piano. We accentuate certain patterns, and one of the reasons that I think salsa and other styles of music sound very cool to me, I have a couple of watches that have a automatic, I guess, mechanism in it, and when you turn it around, you can see the little dials, how they interconnect. Salsa is a little bit like that. You have patterns with the percussion, with the timbales and congas and multiple instruments, including piano, bass, that when everyone does the pattern that they're doing, it almost sounds like a clock and it sounds like it goes around. So understanding that this pattern is a little bit of the starting point is very fundamental. And as a piano player, and this was told to me by a piano player that is fairly successful and somewhat famous, it's important to almost keep track of this note, your third note of the clave. So it's almost when you're going ta, 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 ta. Sometimes that note is good to accentuate it, keep a good grip of where it is. And at the same time, of course, being able to do these things. So the clave is an important aspect of it. You're going to hear it all the time. I was talking yesterday to a friend of mine that is a fairly well-versed drummer, and we were talking about that the clave, it's a concept. It's not necessarily, and some people may go like, okay, this song is this type of clave, and this song is that type of clave. Part of what you can do always with the clave is like check that the singing is almost like it fits, because once you get the pattern, and the pattern, by the way, can start with either the 3 first notes or get reversed and start with the 2 notes. Sometimes when you start putting a percussion pattern, you can see how, oh, okay, the melody fits better with one of the two. So of course that's a little bit broad, but it's a little bit of an idea that we want to share with you guys, because when you're playing these patterns, and we'll show you in a piano in a second, we want you to keep that clave in mind. And with the pattern that I'm actually using today, you can hear, I believe it has literally, the clave is normally two pieces of wood that you can play with each other, and it has a very specific sound, and in the pattern that I'm using, I believe that's there. So covering that, I would like to start, you guys probably got on the PDF, we have 4 different pages. So we're gonna start with Salsa Number One. I'm gonna try to do my best to stay here on time with the duration of the, I guess, workshop that we have. The idea is this, and I'll mention it again if anyone join us later. We're trying to give you an introduction, a little bit of tips and techniques, and then if you register, you're gonna actually get the tutorial. So there's a specific tutorial in which I cover very in depth, and one thing is that I have a software that you can actually see the notes light up and all that, which is hard to do in a live stream. But for me, it's important to mention that you guys definitely, it's almost like if you, when I'm going through this pattern, it's a little bit fast and oh, like I didn't understand this or that, you are gonna have access to the tutorials. So let's jump into a close-up of the piano one more time. And we're gonna start with Salsa Number One. So in Salsa Number One, one of the things that I want to mention to you guys is by now, hopefully, you guys are clear with chords. So one of the things that we want there, let me make sure that everything is working. One of the things that you want there is to make sure that you know your chords. So we're gonna start with a C major chord, C, E, G, then F, A, C, and then G, B, D. Again, this is not a beginner course, so we are assuming that you already hopefully know all of your 12 major chords, and hopefully even all of your 12 minor ones. So now the first chord, I'm gonna play the bottom note, top note, and bottom note. And I'm gonna do that for multiple of them. So I'm gonna go. So I'm going C, F, and G, as those are the chords. And I'm doing bottom note, bottom note, change to F, very similar pattern, bottom note, bottom note, and then going to the right and then doing almost the same thing, G, and then the top notes. So I'll play it up until there so you guys have an idea how that sounds. It sounds. Now, one of the things that I see with students is very important to practice in little chunks, because once we give you this on a paper, it can get a little bit complex. Now, one thing that I want to mention, if you do have the paper at the beginning of the paper, there all the way to the left, you have a C that has a line through it. That means cut time. And cut time is a very important aspect of playing Latin rhythms. One of the things that we do is the quarter note is going to go fast because it allows the sheet music to not look as complex. You do have to get used to being able to read at high speed. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you play pop, sometimes we go 1, 2, 3, 4. In Latin, we always go faster because it allows the notes to not look as, I guess, complex on the paper, but at the same time, it is something that when you're playing piano on Latin, you want to get to the point that you practice with the metronome and get to the get to the flow, because you'll see how we're going to go much faster. So one more time, I'll do the end of that line. The end would be bottom chord, and then the same thing on the F. So once I get to the G chord, I'm not going to do, I just do the bottom, the top. I do the same thing on the F. So let me play it up until there so you have an idea. Now, when I do that one more time, you see a C at the end of the line, in which I'm gonna play it, and it almost sounds like there's two, because I'm gonna sync it again. So very slowly. Now, I would definitely recommend here to make sure that you are using 1, 3, and 5 for the fingers. So 1, 3, 1, 3, and 5, and so on for the chords. If you use other fingers, you may get a little bit, I don't know, like jammed. It may be harder to be accurate. So that is an important thing to keep in mind. Now, the other thing, when you're playing two notes that are supposed to go together, like this two, make sure that you actually push them together. In Latin piano, we're part of the percussion. So we're not playing melody lines as much as we're playing chords, and we're playing them in a very percussive way. So when you're doing things together, it's important to push those keys at the same time, because you're gonna get much more power and much more almost presence. So you don't want like one note after the other, like you want the notes to come together. So that should be it. Let me try to play it with a drum beat. The drum beat that I have here is a little bit on the fast side. Let's see if everything is working. Now, you can do that many times. Of course, that is almost a final result. Make sure that you do it first slow. Let me show you the left hand. The left hand, the good news is in this first example, we said there option 1 is going to be exactly the same. So bottom note, top 2 notes, then same thing on the F chord. On when I get to the G, bottom note, top 2 notes, bottom note, top 2 notes, and it repeats. So if I play the left, now, of course, if this is the first time that you're doing this type of stuff, I'm going a little bit faster just because we have limited time, but make sure that you go. Now, of course, if one of the things that happens in piano, especially when you play Latin, you may be the only instrument playing harmony. Most of the time, there's no guitarist. And most of the time, there's not 3 guitar players like you will get in a Shawn Mendes song or in other styles, especially in pop. So one thing that we do want is for you to double. In this first exercise, we're going to be doubling exactly the same thing because it's a little bit of a way to get you started. So both hands are going to play the same thing at the same time, moving, of course, there to the right. And one more time, be careful there of pushing those things together. I'll play it up to speed so you guys have an idea, because I do want to get to option 2, which is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting. So it will sound. Now, one thing that I would like also to mention, whenever you're playing this type of styles, you want a piano sound that is bright. This specific keyboard is particularly good for that because it has a really bright sound. For me, depending on the style of music that I will do, I will not choose this sound because to me it's almost too bright. But for danceable type of things, I think this actually is a great sound. So that is something that if you're playing a ballad, you may want to change the piano sound. But if you're playing this, you definitely want, I will almost describe it as like a little bit of a boxy type of bright piano sound. And definitely probably not a lot of reverb, and we can talk about that probably later. So let's go to option 2. Now in option 2, a very cool thing, and I'll play it first very slowly. Now you can tell that it sounds a little bit almost like a little bit more color to it, a little bit more, I guess, full. The reason that it sounds like that is because I'm using a different inversion for my right hand. So instead of doubling, I move my right hand to do a C in inversion. That will be second inversion, in which I'm doing C, E and G, then A, C and F. So I'll play it very slowly. So C, C and E, then A, C and F, then to the B, and there's a D and a G there, and then an A and a C and an F. So if I start playing it in time, now, if you've never done this, it may be a little bit almost, I guess, intricate to be able to, okay, your hands are playing different notes. The good news is that the left is exactly the same. We're not going to change it for option 2. But when I play them together, I think it really fills up the sound a little bit better. So another thing to keep in mind, don't make the left hand louder than the right hand. You want to make your balance be good, and among other things, I would say your right hand should be a little bit louder. This is also something that we don't necessarily want to super accentuate just one note. When you're playing it, you want to make sure that it almost sounds like a unit. So this is a unit. That's a unit too, so make sure that you play that. So I'll play that so you guys have an idea how it sounds here with even drums and bass. So one more time, of course, this may take a little bit of practice. So we are definitely giving you this as a routine, as something to get your feet wet. Don't be hard on yourself if it takes you a while. One of the things that we're trying to do is absolutely give you guys options. So I do want to move to Salsa Number Two. So when we're talking about Salsa Number Two, the pattern is very, very similar, but now we're actually using minor chords. And you're actually going to see how it sounds almost, to me, I think a little bit more interesting. So I'll do the right hand first. Now, the chords that we're going to be using is C minor. So that's a C, E flat, and G. So F minor, F, A flat, and C. And then G, the G is actually major because it's dominant, so G, B, and D. Now, the pattern is exactly the same, just I'm changing all the G's, all the E's, sorry, to flats, and all the A's to flats. Sounds like this. And I really like minor harmony because I think it, I don't know, sounds a little bit more like, I don't know, I think a little bit more interesting, depending on the song, of course. So there, you're gonna be, as an exercise first, just do it doubling. So we're gonna play both hands doing the same thing. Of course, we also want you to try to do option 2. Now, let me play that with, I guess, drums and bass for a second. Now, these things, I think, to me, have a groove, right? And the groove is almost hard to put on a paper. I think the groove is something that you almost... To me, the groove has to do with feeling, has to be with what are you feeling at the moment that you play it. But listen to music, listen to this type of style, because when you're listening to other people play it, and even better, play parts with other people on top of what they're playing already, that is exactly the same part, you're almost gonna get a little bit, oh, that's how it sounds, that's how it feels. So let's cover option 2. Option 2, again, is exactly the same thing as the other paper, but now in minor. So I'm going to second inversion on my right hand, going this. So there, I think the fingerings, hopefully those that I'm playing there would work. So 1, 2, and 4 for C and E flat. Keep on going to, of course, 1 on A flat. That's the F minor chord in inversion, and then we're gonna do regular B's and then back down. So Again, I'm covering this fairly quickly because you will get access to the tutorial in which I go very in detail of how to cover this, and that you can do at intro-to-latinpiano.com. So now let me go ahead and play that with bass so you guys have an idea what it would sound on this using inversions and how it sounds a little bit fuller. So before I move to the next thing, one thing that I want to tell you, as an added, you can start playing the notes maybe one at a time. So there's almost like infinite options into what you're playing. What's important is to slowly polish your ability to play what's supposed to go together, and of course get very familiar with the chords and with these patterns. If you've never done them, I think it's definitely going to take a while, because it's nothing. The majority of things that are on the radio right now don't really resemble this type of thing, especially on the radio. I'm talking about Billboard, hip hop, that type of thing. So if you always played other styles, this may be very like, okay, this is definitely new. So let's cover now the how to play reggae. This is a little bit of a bonus. We'll do another pattern in a second. But reggae, to me, it's a very, very interesting style. People really like it, and I think reggae can really be something that all the piano players should know. And one thing that we see all the time is when we get piano players to play reggae in the hit music studio, they almost struggle with playing, and at the same time they struggle with keeping the notes on track. So one thing, you want to play reggae mostly with organ. That's a little bit of a generalization, but I like it with organ. One thing that you have, depending on the style and on the band, I think the organ sustains notes well, and it almost cuts through the mix for the style of music that also would probably work well. Now let me show you. The right hand is pretty simple. I'm going to play two chords here. I'm doing a C major and a G major. So C, E, G. I'm doing it up there instead of doing it in middle C, but up here, C, E, G. Now I'm playing three notes, bottom note, three notes, like this. And I'm doing that for every bar that I play the chord. Then I'm going to move to the left and do the same thing with G. So that's pretty easy, and that's something that hopefully for most people it wouldn't be too hard to do. I mean, unless you never played chords, but if you have played chords and you're familiar, it should be pretty easy. Now, what we definitely want out of this is to show you the left hand. The left hand I was shown by a guy that he was from Jamaica, and he told me that in there they call it bubble. Bubble is taking your left hand and doing pretty much eighth notes on the upbeats. So it sounds. And there what I'm doing, of course, once you start playing it with the other hand, it gives a very specific feel to reggae, especially when you're playing live, that is very different than when I see keyboard players just going with one note. So instead of doing that, and let me do it very slowly, you're going to start with the left and go like this. It's a very zigzag between the hands. Now, one thing that you want out of the left hand is a lot of stability, very, very, I don't know, clear, and at the same time, very stable. The notes also probably not on the loud side, depends on the settings of your organ. The notes may sound all the same because organs sometimes do not have touch sensitivity. But you want to make sure here that you're doing it very steady. So I'll try to play it with drums for a second. Now there we wrote it in a way that you have 2 bars of C, then 4 bars of G, and then another 2 bars of C. And that's somewhat into the style. It happens a lot depending on the song. Definitely, as with anything, practice super slow. And this, by the way, can happen with any chord. So if you tell me, okay, the song has A minor and E minor. So again, this of course are patterns that we're trying to simplify it so people can actually, get started with the process, but it's definitely something that we want to give you a framework that you can practice something. Reggae, I think, is a style that, in addition to playing, I guess, the music that we listen to in the some on radio, Spotify, and all that now, can definitely be a great, I don't know, almost like added thing to the way that you practice, because we're used to playing a lot of downbeats. So we're used to playing a lot on the 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4. This is almost completely upside down on that. So again, I think it's a great addition. So that's gonna be reggae for you guys. And here we are doing fairly good with time. So we're gonna go to the last one. So this last one. And once again, if you're joining us now, we can give you the copies of the sheet music that we made for this mini course. If you go to intro-to-latinpiano.com, and there you can register, so we can send you the PDF with that, and at the same time send you a link to the tutorials that we made for this specific course. Now the next one is going to be merengue, and merengue is a very specific style that involves a lot of almost playing with the hands, helping each other, I guess I would like to say. Let me play it, and then I'll show you a little bit of how I like to think about it. Now, one of the things, I remember the first time that I saw a song that was pretty fast on merengue, and I really felt like, okay, I'm never gonna be able to play that, because it was something super fast, like something like that. And I think one thing that is important here is that once someone puts it, almost breaks it down in steps, it's not that hard. It is something that you have to practice so you can assemble it and get your mind and your fingers to be able to keep these patterns up. Now, let me show you. You're gonna go G with the right hand, immediately followed by CE on the left. And then twice with, and I'm playing what's of course on the PDF that you have, then 2 more times with CE on the right hand. So that first block would sound, and I would practice just that. Take your time. Now, one thing that I want to mention this on purpose, the notes that we wrote there, if you read them the way that they're on the paper, will be down here. But we move them here. Well, we're trying to play them higher just because that's where they should go. But sometimes when we put notes that are pretty high, people get confused. So we're trying to simplify the paper. So one more time, the first bar would be. Now, right after I do the 2 here with the right hand, I'm going to almost answer my hand with the left hand, playing pretty much the same notes. So it's a lot of doubling, but the doubling doesn't really happen with both hands at the same time. Now there I played measure 2, in which I'm doing almost a zigzag between the hands, 2 Gs, bottom notes with C and E, top notes with C and E, bottom notes with C and E. Important to mention, depending on your age, if you have trouble playing octaves, you may have, a little bit of a hard time depending on your keyboard. If you have a keyboard that is smaller, it may be easier. If you have a grand piano, it may be harder. But I've seen a lot of people that are younger being able to not necessarily struggle playing an octave. I think as you grow, your hand, of course, is going to get bigger. But more importantly, we can all learn how to stretch our hands. So I think even if your hands are not necessarily really large, or you have trouble with this, you can learn how to get probably wide enough that you can reach that. So let me play this line 2. Line 2 is going to be almost pretty much identical, only that the first note of the bars, I'm going to change it to A. Now it's an A minor chord, but it sounds like this. So the pattern that I'm doing between the hands of going is actually played 4 times using 4 different chords in this example. So the chords, by the way, are C major, A minor, F major, and G major, of course, in parts. So let me play the pattern very, very slowly, I guess, of the first 3 lines. That's the C chord, A, F, G. So when you get to the F, we're a little bit of switching there, of course. You can see, and I don't know if this is interesting to you guys, I'm not playing the bottom F on this pattern because in this pattern you're supposed to have a bass player. So the way that we play, it's almost like we don't necessarily, as in piano and salsa and merengue, in a lot of styles, you don't want to be doubling notes down here. That's almost the range of the bass player. So you want to play a little bit on the middle of the piano and really reinforce it there because that's technically your job. So when we go here to the line 3, you're going to do 2 Fs, A and C, C and A with the right hand twice, and then the little zigzag, and then very similar on G, but I'm starting on B and D on the bottom. So my suggestion on this one, when you practice it, take the pattern of the first line and make sure that you can play it slowly. And maybe repeat just that. Once you get to the point that you can do it faster, maybe you can start switching to the other chords. So I'm gonna play it here for a second so you guys can check it out with the, I guess, bass and drums. It will sound. One final thing that I can tell you on merengue, it's a little bit anticipated. It's almost like you use the energy of your playing to push it through a little bit. So in other styles, you want to be a little bit laid back, which if you put a metronome on, you want to be right on it or a little bit almost behind on the beat. In this type of style, it's almost like I feel like merengue is one of those few styles that as a piano player, it is your responsibility to have an energy, not rush, because that wouldn't make sense, but at the same time, definitely push a little bit through. So hopefully that is makes sense, and it's a great introduction. Once again, you know, for anyone that is joining us, we on purpose put a very specific website so we can share the pages of the sheet music and at the same time to the tutorials, because I think everyone learns differently. And if you are, you know, just I guess meeting us from the Hit Music Studio on the different channels that we have, what's important for us is that people can actually not get stuck on the notation. Notation is wonderful and it's important to be able to read as a musician, but at the same time we want our students to be able to include this in their practice and really go through and try to be able to play things. So for us, I want to see if we have any questions that we can answer. Definitely be patient with yourself. One of the things that happens, and for example, like I haven't played music from other parts of the world. I've done a lot of like Latin American type of thing, pop. If you go to I don't know, literally the other side of the world, and maybe go to India and someone's showing you all these things that you've never played, it will probably take a while to be like, okay, let me learn this scale, and that's new, and I never heard about that. I think when something is new, you want to be patient. And one of the things that we see with these patterns is they can really develop you as a musician. And one thing that I like is this. Instead of practicing scales, maybe this can be a great way to get your mechanics a little bit further, because there's a lot of exercises out there for piano players, but I do believe that this have a lot of coordination between them. Once you start picking up the speed, it literally makes a difference. So I think it's definitely something that is very cool to practice and to include to your routine. So let's see, what artists do you recommend listening to? Let me see. To better understand Latin music, and who is best to follow, especially for beginners. One thing that I would suggest is going almost to people that when they perform, their Latin side is very like stripped down. There's a couple of artists that I like. One of them is Carlos Santana. So Carlos Santana was one of the ones that when I started learning Latin, the piano teacher that I had back then said, like, you should really listen to his music. His music has a lot of different elements to it, but I do think that the way that he does Latin, it's, I guess, different than if you do, let's say, salsa, merengue. That's a really good question, by the way. I would say salsa, definitely the story of salsa and all that. I mean, salsa literally comes, I think, as a mix from Afro-Cuban rhythms that ended up in New York, and in New York people really transformed it into other things. One thing that I would say, maybe look for the most successful songs in salsa. And then, like, because we know from the most successful song in history is the Don't Stop Believing in terms of sales. You can probably very easily Google, what are the most successful songs in history for salsa, and then listen to those, because the songs that are the most popular in salsa can probably be a great way to, okay, those are very good, I don't know, representations of what the style is like and what it sounds done by people that are very high level, because if a song is incredibly successful, usually it's for a reason. So that was a great question. I hope definitely you guys got some value. Remember to follow us here in the multiple channels that we have. We're going to continue to share a lot of content and continue to do workshops. So we definitely want to try to help people that are young, give you guys a framework. I really hope that the students that we got watching this, and by now, hopefully you guys, if you're watching on the live, you should have gotten the email with the tutorials. And at the same time, if you're watching on the replay, definitely thank you so much for being a part of it. So we definitely will see you guys on the next one. Thank you for your time. And we're called the Hit Music Studio, and we'll see you soon.